So พระอาจารย์ไพโรธ first talk about during หลวงพ่อ very young time he would always tell us that you can ask questions but your questions cannot be more than 4 lines long and he understand that sometimes we have experiences from our practice where only 4 lines of writing is not enough to explain what we are encountering and he understand that so sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who's like himself who is like a assistant to Long Po and then clarify something so that we can really clearly understand what we should ask Long Po very young and Prajan gave an example that there was a monk who used to practice and then he started to see visions of like pain within himself and then he made this determination that he would want to fight this pain until it goes away and eventually the pain turns into like a face of a demon and he was always fighting with that and eventually overcome that vision of demon as his pain and after that this monk saw a different vision of deities and goddesses descending down to him from above and telling him that now you have gained this very deep samadhi and realization don't stay here in this painful state but come with us we would bring you to a higher realm and there's a place waiting for you to come and take your throne and actually that is also an illusion and it took him 8 years and he was stuck within that illusion and not getting out of it so he asked Ajahn Pairot what should I do with this state it's been 8 years and I didn't get any progress so Ajahn Pairot said how come you disapprove of the visions of demons but you approve the visions of something good like goddesses and deities but actually both of these visions are both illusions so next time when you encounter this illusion try doing this ask yourself who is experiencing this vision who is seeing this vision and try and see how that goes so the next day the monk followed Ajahn Pairot's advice and he said after he asked that question when the deities came to him again then suddenly all the visions dropped and he saw this clear state of pure awareness arising within his chest and it became very clear so he felt that it was very beneficial for him to ask Ajahn Pairot before going to Long Po so this is the kind of relationship that we can have with someone who is like Ajahn Pairot where you can ask questions but during Long Po very young's time he would always limit our questions to only not more than 4 lines because he wouldn't have time to read so much so this is what Ajahn Pairot shared with us so no matter what we practice even though sometimes we feel like we don't see results there's always some kind of development in the mind that happens when we keep continuing doing our practice as well and for the second part Ajahn Pairot asked he would like to raise one question to all of us in this Sangha that is there anyone in the world who does not have thoughts? Is there anyone who does not think in this world? And Ajahn Pairot gave an answer that actually even the Buddha was also thinking and even all the arahats, the realized beings, they also think. So thinking is a natural process of all of us. There's only one type of person who does not think and that is the dead person so he wants to emphasize that so when we do meditation when we do our mental recitation of Buddha it's also a kind of thought but it's we're intentionally using Buddha as not letting the mind going astray into all different kinds of thoughts but to focus on this one particular thought and focus and develop your concentration from that So we train ourselves to think of one thing, but not training ourselves to not think at all. And that is impossible. So when you practice, don't try to not think, but try to maintain the quality of awareness to be able to know what you're thinking, to know when the thinking starts. So we use Putto to train ourselves to know the mind when it's thinking. And also when you keep practicing and eventually you drop the word Putto and you're left with only just being aware of the location point or the base of where all of these mental thoughts arise. So in that case, it's also possible that eventually thoughts would happen, emotions would happen. But what we are doing is we're not trying to block away those thoughts, but we want to allow the thoughts to appear, but we are realizing it. We know that it's happening. Or we can say that we realize that the thought arises and then we drop the thoughts. So he wants to emphasize that we're not practicing so that we force the mind to not think, but we practice so that we are able to be aware when thoughts arise as it naturally would need to arise. So when the mind is more energized, it would start to realize the thoughts arising and starts to see the process of the thoughts and how the thoughts came about. And this also comes about when you observe that eventually there would be rapture arising or happiness or piti or sukha arises. So we learn to be able to see both the pleasant states of mind without thoughts and also the state of agitated mind that thoughts also arise. So in all of this process, there is a stream of thoughts that happens. So don't be afraid that thoughts arise, but learn how to be aware of it. So at this state of our practice together, I think all of us start to develop our mind, and many of us would now see that your mind is now more calm, without agitation, without so many thoughts like before. But Ajahn Phairot wants to emphasize that even if our mind is more stable, using the mental note, mental recitation, or the word Bhutto is still necessary. He wants to emphasize that it's still necessary. So this is the way that we start to cultivate the quality of the mind, that we are familiar with one object, with one thought. And then once it becomes more subtle, then we can see the process of other thoughts. But don't think that you would come to the state where you only recite Bhutto once and the mind would have to be calm right away. Sometimes you have to keep repeating Bhutto for a while, and then you would start to see the mind eventually getting more calm. It's not like you have been practicing for many days and then when you start reciting Bhutto, the mind will start to have always like with this glowing state of mind right away. So don't be forcing yourself to drop Bhutto too fast. Be patient with yourself and try not to, when you develop your concentration or samadhi, Ajahn Phairot said, Luang Por always emphasized, don't do it, don't rush, don't force yourself to have concentration. You cannot force yourself to have concentration. So step by step, try to develop your quality of mind gradually, and eventually the mind will start to transform itself, and then it becomes more stable and become more pliable to go to deeper states of mind. So อีกหน้าหนึ่งครับอีกหน่อยครับ So
ผมพูดเยอะขนาดนั้นเลยเหรอ
เยอะกว่านี้อีกหน่อยหนึง So what he would conclude is that what we're practicing, we want to practice to be able to know every moment of thought, every moment of the mind's movement. So and then you would start to see the process of your thoughts and emotions arising. And eventually, this would come from the mind that has accumulated mental power. And this, even though you don't see this process right away, every time that you do your practice, the mind's always accumulating energy. And once you do accumulate this mental energy in your formal sessions when you do your sitting meditation with your eyes closed. Even though you don't get into deep states of jhana, but when you get out of that sitting session or formal meditation, then that energy of the mind would be with you when you live in your normal states, where you start to see your thoughts and emotions, and you start to see the process of mental fabrications. And then you can also use that state as the base for doing vipassana at that state as well. So don't force yourself and just develop this mental quality of energy, and then you start to develop your mental states accordingly. ครับผม
ขอบคุณครับคำถามจากท่านอาจารย์เจตวิริยะขอบคุณ
So now the questions that is been raised. So the first question is, in this Kurusa Samadhi course, is there a session where we would share our feelings or practice at the end? And Ajahn Pairod's answer is yes. There is a session of sharing at the end of this course on the date 18 and 19th. And he would like to ask all of us to share experiences of the practice for about 5 minutes each. And Ajahn Pairod said, actually, this is not to share just for him, but this is actually what Luang Por Viriyang is always interested in. Luang Por would always be sitting there, and he would like to really listen to what his students have to say about the practice. No matter whether it's good or whatever kind of experience, Luang Por would always be there, and he would like to listen to all of us sharing what we have experienced during our course and our practice. So there would be a sharing session on the 18th and 19th for 5 minutes each. The second question is concerning the eating of meat. So there are certain kinds of, usually monks can eat certain kinds of meat, but there are 10 types of animal meat that we are not supposed to eat. What are they? And so Ajahn Pairod said, there are 10 types of animal meat that monks are not supposed to eat, and there are usually the types of meat that most ordinary humans, people don't eat anyway. So those are, for example, there's 10. Flesh of the human flesh, the elephant, the horse, dogs, snakes, tigers, cheetahs, bears, lions, for example. So these are the types of animals that monks are not supposed to eat. And these animals are now very rare, and actually there is a reason. The reason is in the old days there were monks, or there were people who eat snakes, and then they were bitten by snakes. And monks are supposed to be living relating to the forest or the jungles, and usually animals, they can sense or they can smell people or other animals that eat their own kind. For example, Ajahn Pairod said there's a village where the people of that village, they eat dogs, and the dogs around them would know, they can smell, they can sense that these people are eating the eating dogs, so they bark and they bite those people. So in order to keep the monks safe in the forest, this is the one idea that why many different kinds of dangerous animals are forbidden to be eaten by monks. So Ajahn Pairod said, like last year he went to Sripada in Sri Lanka, and the officials actually told them that your plan to go up to Sripada today should be cancelled, because just yesterday at 5 p.m. there was a tiger who came out and ate and attacked some of the tourists of that area. So this is to emphasize that monks stays in the forest. So there are many, at least 10 kinds of animals that monks are forbidden to eat. ครับอาจารย์
ขอบคุณครับในเรื่องกินเนี่ยนะ
ไปที่คำถามเลยนะครับ
ครับผมครับที่คำถามเลยครับผม
So the second question is, when I do my walking meditation, there is usually some thoughts that comes in between when I'm doing my meditation, and I remember that Luang Por Viriyang said to trace the thoughts and observe and trace the thoughts. So my question is, how should I do it? Because whenever I try to observe or trace the thoughts already disappear. So Ajahn Pairod's answer is, it's actually very normal that when we do our practice and there are thoughts, whenever our mind has this quality of mindfulness arise or awareness arises, then eventually, naturally the thoughts would disappear. But when we talk about tracing back the thoughts, Prajaan said it's very similar to the simile that we used to say that it's like the mother cow eating grass, but also having an eye peeking at their younger cow close by the cub. So this is kind of how we trace the thoughts, or kind of peakly observe the thoughts. So when we do our walking meditation, we use our mental recitation of Buddha as the foundation, but we also kind of have half eye open and peek and observe to see when thoughts arise. And eventually, if your mind is more energized, you would see how the thoughts arise. And eventually, if the mind is accumulated more energy, it would even see like how the thoughts came about, even before the thoughts would appear. So you also eventually see like when the mind goes into your trance state, and how it comes out of the trance state of Bhavanka, how all of this came about. So in order to do the practice correctly, Prajaan Pairod said you have to always keep your attention on your mental recitation, and that is like the cow eating the grass. But while you're having your attention on the mental recitation, also have a small part of your attention observe how thoughts arise, and that is the simile of the mother cow observing its younger cow at the backside of their attention. So he gave us example that in the past when Luang Por Viriyang was practicing with Luang Pu Man would ask Luang Por Viriyang, Viriyang, how are you doing your walking meditation? And Luang Por Viriyang would answer, when I do my walking meditation, I recite Buddha and I walk. And Luang Pu Man said, you're doing it wrong. And the next occasion, when Luang Pu Man asked Luang Por Viriyang, how are you doing your walking meditation? And Luang Por Viriyang said, actually I was thinking that I've never been to the sea, and I was wondering what the sea is like, and that's what I saw in my meditation. And Luang Pu Man said, now you're doing the walking meditation correctly. So the idea is that you're not supposed to force yourself to not think by focusing fully on Buddha, but to allow the thoughts to also happen, but then trace back how the thoughts came about. So in conclusion, when you practice your walking meditation, you focus your main attention on the recitation of Buddha, but at the back of your mind, you kind of observe slightly at how your thoughts came about. And if your mind has accumulated enough energy, you would see the thoughts that is arising. And if it accumulates even more energy, you would start to see even before the thoughts arise.
คำถามจากท่านอาจารย์สัตวัฒน์ครับ
So this question is concerning when we are listening to Luang Por Viriyang's teachings, I would kind of go into this Bhavanka trance state and kind of fell asleep often, and eventually I would hear Luang Por's voice at the end before I wake up. So what is this situation? And Prajaan Pairod said this is like falling asleep and eventually just wake up. So this is Ajahn Pairod then gave an example that in the past, when he went to Dhamma talks and he would see a lot of monks sitting, listening to Dhamma talks and all like with a straight back, like they are in a state of samadhi. And Ajahn Pairod asked his teacher at that time, like, what are the monks doing when they listen to Dhamma talks in a meditative state like that? And his teacher said that actually those monks are sleeping. They close their eyes, they're not in a state of samadhi, but actually they are falling asleep, but they are very stiff in their body. So this is a wrong way to engage with Dhamma talks. When you listen to Dhamma talks, it's actually intended for you to accumulate hearing and listening to Dhamma. So if you listen to the Dhamma and you fall asleep, then that means you're missing the whole point of going into Dhamma talk session. So in our course, actually it's actually very good that you all have the document to go with Luang Por's teaching, and especially for Thai listeners, we are more lucky that we can also hear Luang Por's in his own language and also read what Luang Por has been talking about. And so it's actually very beneficial for us to also check the document and read the document with listening to Luang Por Virayang's teaching. It's a lot better than if you listen to Luang Por's teaching and you close your eyes, you try to recite Bhutto for a while, and then you drop the Bhutto and then you fall asleep. That is not the intention of listening to a Dhamma talk like this. So Ajahn says sometimes he sees that some monks listening to Dhamma talks and then they feel sleepy. So instead of sitting and falling asleep, they move to the back and do some walking meditation while listening to Luang Por's teaching. This is actually a good remedy, a good way to tackle sleepiness. So Ajahn said you can do that if you need to. So what he would not want you to do is listening to Luang Por's teaching, close your eyes, try to go to a meditation, but then fall asleep and not hearing anything that Luang Por is teaching. That is not good. But if you are able to go into samadhi and during that concentration or sitting meditation, you are still awake and you are able to listen to Luang Por's teaching without falling asleep, then that is good. You can also do that. So you can try both ways. But anyway, try not to fall asleep during the Dhamma talk sessions. ครับผม
ขอบคุณครับผม
So the first question is concerning Vipassanupakilesa and Samatthupakilesa. Are they different or are they the same? And what is the condition? And how should we learn to notice it? And how should we engage and fix it? So I don't know if you're familiar with this phrase. So Vipassanupakilesa is the kilesa that came from the practicing of vipassana. And Samatthupakilesa is the kilesa that comes from developing or practicing shamatha. So both of these are like refined kilesa. It's not a big kilesa like anger, greed, and delusion. It's more refined kilesa. But this refined kilesa is actually small but important in our practice. So when we do vipassana and samatha, when we start to do our practice, once we develop the practice and we start to get certain results from the practice, then there would be certain kilesa that comes about from these experiences from our practice as well. For example, when you start to do shamatha and the mind starts to have this clear light, start to be bright, start to have this opat, this quality is happening from both doing vipassana and doing shamatha. And this is actually a good sign, but it's actually something that is cling on to by the mind. So this is something that we need to observe and let go. So this is the meaning of the kilesa that comes from the practicing of shamatha or vipassana. And this also concerns other quality that happens from the practice like rapture, happiness, nikanti, vimoh, or even the quality of feeling liberated. If any of these qualities happens from our practice and we cling on to them, then it can turn into kilesa. So the difference is when you do shamatha and when the mind starts to be calm or be clear and the mind clings on to this result of practicing shamatha that comes from peacefulness, then that is the result is then the samatupakilesha comes from the peacefulness that happens from doing shamatha. But when the mind starts to do vipassana by contemplation, by considering these qualities of the mind, and the mind starts to accumulate this result or start to have certain realization or understanding arises, and the mind clings on to those realization or understanding, then that is what we call vipassanupakilesha. It comes from doing vipassana and contemplate the quality of phenomena. So they both have 10 qualities that comes from doing shamatha or vipassana that can become this minor kilesha. So the difference is samatupakilesha comes from doing shamatha, and vipassanupakilesha comes from doing vipassana. So how do we recognize them? So whenever the mind, when you do shamatha, and the mind comes to a state of ekaggata or one-pointedness or quality of concentrated one-pointedness, whenever the mind is going astray from that ekaggata quality, then that is all of the quality that brings you out from the state of ekaggata that comes from shamatha. We call that samatupakilesha. And for vipassanupakilesha, whatever quality of mind that brings you away from the quality of mindfulness or of awareness or seeing clearly as it is, and you get lost into thinking that you have attained certain qualities and you lose your sense of awareness, then that is the foundation of what we call vipassanupakilesha. So whatever tricks you or lead you astray from developing wisdom, that is what we call vipassanupakilesha. And the way to fix it or remedy to fix vipassanupakilesha and samatupakilesha is to always be aware of every moment of your mental recitation of Bhutto, and also being aware of every moment of the movements of the mind, and see the stream of your mental thoughts or mental activity. That is the remedy to get out of this vipassanupakilesha or samatupakilesha. The second question is concerning the patimoksha, and the question is, how are our great masters relate to patimoksha, and how much importance do they give to listening and reciting the patimoksha? Prajan said, actually, sila is the foundation that leads to the state of samadhi, and samadhi is the foundation that leads to the state of panya or wisdom. So having sila as our foundation is actually very important. And when we attend our patimoksha recitation, it's actually the time where we come and we recollect our vows, and we recheck our practice of keeping these vows in the past. And so this is actually a helpful state for us. And it's also a place or a situation where we cultivate or we maintain the flourishing of the Buddha Shasana. So our teachers from the past gave very much importance to the patimoksha, both in terms of keeping our precept and also to maintain the Buddha Shasana. So in the patimoksha, the important is we observe ourselves and we kind of purify our personal sila, but also coming together as a sangha is also a way that we help maintain the passing on of the tradition of keeping our vows and rechecking our patimoksha. It's a way to give our encouragement to the monks who want to pursue the recitation of the Patimoksha as well.